So the appeals court came back and said Judge Merchan properly weighted the First Amendment rights of Donald Trump versus the rights of the witnesses, the judges, the court families, court staff, etc., against their right to both privacy and avoiding jury tampering and witness tampering and harassment, as well as the call to arms that he likes to put out to his base. But I'm not surprised, because if you look at the two previous gag orders that Donald Trump had in the E. Jean Carroll case and then in D.C., in both of those cases, I think it was the E. Jean Carroll case that when they lifted the gag, like when Donald Trump appealed the gag order, they said he could talk about, like the appeals court's like, well, yeah, you can still talk about the judge himself. That's fine. Okay, then you look at the D.C. case, and the D.C. case said, well, yeah, you can still talk about the overall prosecutor, which was Jack Smith in that case. But the rest of it was fine. So when Judge Merchan crafted this gag order, he's like, you can talk about everybody else. Or you can't talk about everybody else, I mean. But you can talk about me and you can talk about Alvin Bragg, but nobody else. So he already carved out the two exceptions that appeals courts had already said to different gag orders and said, okay, well, you'll get those. So I'm not surprised the gag order stood. So Donald Trump keeps losing there. But something else I read when I was reading this article saying that the gag order stood, somebody said, the author said, well, the judge has lifted up and eased enforcing of it. No, he hasn't. In fact, quite the opposite. And I say that because Donald Trump has appealed to Judge Merchan, trying to get an exemption to talk about Stormy Daniels, and the judge said no. And the judge very emphatically, when imposing the $1,000 fine, said, look, I don't have any choice. You keep doing this, I'm going to put you in jail. I don't want to, but I will. And since then, Donald Trump has walked right up to the line, but tried very hard not to cross it. And the other half of it is, the judge can't unilaterally do this. The prosecution has to file a motion to the judge, and basically, even if the judge saw it himself on TV or whatever, the prosecution has to file the motion to the judge to say, you need to take a look at this and do something about him violating this gag order. And unless Donald Trump would do something like in front of the judge, specifically in the courtroom, he can't just unilaterally do it. He has to have the motion filed first. And there hasn't been, to my knowledge, there hasn't been another motion filed about him violating the gag order. But either way, the gag order stands. And Donald Trump is so terrified about going to prison even for a day or two that he will walk right up to that line, but he's trying really hard not to cross.